Leo Lanzagami is on the first hour on Thursdays now regularly. He has so much information to pour out regarding his latest book, which is Confessions of an Illuminati Part 2. Part 3 is in the works for next year. Part 1 is available from last fall. You can get it on Barnes & Noble and on Amazon. Welcome back to the program, Leo.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can indeed, all the way from Rome, with good Skype connection today.
Yes, and, today the world is the main thing that is happening on the street, of course, is the Brexit here in Europe, because all the equilibriums of this European Union lie on this exit or non-exit of Great Britain. But of course, there has been a conspiracy already to force Britain to vote in a certain direction. And that conspiracy was, of course, the murder of Joe Cox, which was this English member of parliament who, from the Labour Party, who, of course, defended the rights of refugees and so on, and was for Great Britain not leaving Europe. And by killing her with this guy who was apparently a member of the far right. But everybody knows, and you know yourself, that it's very easy to manipulate these right-wingers if they are a little bit in the extreme factions. And for the intelligence services, it's pretty easy to create out of them a Manchurian candidate that can come into the equation once is needed, and especially now. They really needed to turn things around, and the murder of this member of parliament in England seems that has really changed things around, and probably they will also do like they did with the referendum for the independence of Scotland, no?
Right, very similar situation, although yesterday, we talked about this, the polls late yesterday, was 49 to leave and 42% to stay. I don't know if the Cox deal was enough to swing it, but it's possible what they may do is try to steal it by, the usual chicanery with voting.
Well, this was enough, really. I think they had probably 5 or even 7 points more if they didn't have this unfortunate event.
Right.
The thing that I don't understand is really how can the husband of this woman still defend these people when he is the first victim of it all, because of course he has
he's defending the massive immigration when they're the ones that stir up this event. They're trying to blame it on an ultra-right-winger.
Defending the membership in the European Union, which is basically equal to slavery these days.
Right.
Because the European Union is completely in the hands of the Bilderberg Club, of the Aspen Institute, and of all the various oligarchies that invest in it, and of course the aristocratic families of mainland Europe, and even the British royal family, even if it seems like officially they like to give this image, even the Queen, of being for the Brexit. It's all a pathetic show that is done in order for, people will say, oh, God protect the Queen, she was with us because we wanted to leave Europe. But in reality, probably, I think that in a few hours we will get to the results, and these results will be probably 47 for the ones who actually wanted to go leave Europe, and probably 53 for the ones that instead want to stay. I think that this
are they giving predictive numbers, or is it over there?
At the moment, the predicting numbers they're giving seems that this Joe Cox effect definitely has brought the Remain faction to be predominant. Of course,
wow.
We still hope.
That's pretty remarkable, because now let's analyze the effects of the.
If, for example, by miracle this didn't happen, there is actually a plan, and this plan is that Donald Trump is visiting a golf club he's opening up in Scotland right now. And if, of course, Donald is for the Brexit, and in that case he will make an intervention. But if, of course, things stay this way, nothing will happen.
Right. So, well, I'll tell you what I suspect. I know that they can steal about 5 to 7%. I think the percentage difference is enough now that it's a 50-50 chance whether or not it'll actually
But
go
you
through.
see, 50% chance in the hands of these kind of people means they can easily swing it one way or the other.
Right.
The CIA helped forging and creating Europe in the last 50 years.
I'm going to make a contrarian theory. I think, although the Joe Cox thing happened, I think that it's a plan. Just like I had an interesting discussion the other day when I was up in Portland of a Kurdish man who was inside know. He actually quoted specific videos and material that when they took the Shah of Iran out, who was ex-CIA operative, they told him, say, we're removing you, we're going to put in the Ayatollah Khomeini, and we're going to Islamify Iran, which, by the way, at that time had strip clubs and was pretty westernized. In fact, a lot of people would take trips from Europe and go to vacation in Iran before 1979, the revolution. It was a CIA operation, even the media. So the Ayatollah actually made a written contract deal with the CIA to bring him into power, along with the mullahs who were there. And the Shah was actually told by the CIA not to be too aggressive against the mullahs who were already stirring up in Iran. So when they removed him, the Shah asked, to be given harbor. So he was given harbor in America. And when the Khomeini took power, he tried to actually see if he could have the CIA bring him back to Iran so he could execute him publicly. He said, no, we made a deal with him, so he's one of ours. What you have to understand is what's going on with Brexit, and this is why I'm going to make a contrarian theory just as a possible. I think they want to have Britain leave. I think they want to create a financial crisis right now. I think they want to see the disappearance of national borders, and nothing would be more effective than doing two things. Brexit, where they leave, maybe by a percentage or two. Number two, as a result of that, they'll have to get loans in order to run. The national boundaries between different states inside Europe will completely disappear. They're 85% gone now, but they'll go completely. And you'll see the absorption also of Turkey as a Turkic part of the expanded European empire, which will now be basically 40 million additional Turks that are part of Europe. That's where I think this is going. I don't think they actually want to counteract the leaving of Britain. I
think they've been pretty obvious today. Maybe you were in America, you didn't see it, but here the media were simply disgusting. I mean, at one point, they even came up on the main newspaper in Italy saying Game of Thrones, the TV series, is in jeopardy if Britain leaves the Europe. Because of the financing for the TV series.
Remember, this is space chess. I'm throwing the theory out to see if there's any weight to it. I'm not saying it's necessarily true, but I'm saying you have to understand the value of the snake is that it's so sneaky. You don't know. You just, for example, when I heard that the Ayatollah was actually brought in by the CIA.
The thing is this: when I saw the monetary fund head in France, in Paris, kind of condemning this choice, and even Mario Monti, who is the ex-prime minister in Italy, came out yesterday on the newspaper, and he's he's a member of the board of directors of the Bilderberg Club. So he's a really powerful individual, this guy. And this guy said, we gave too much democracy to Great Britain. They shouldn't have been able to do this choice. Now, when you say that, and you say it quite freely and openly in the news, it means that you don't care anymore about the sovereignty. Another politician...
Exactly, that's my point. The whole thing is they want Fortress Europe. They want to collapse it, and the best way to collapse it actually is Brexit.
I tell you that I think that unfortunately, because I think a Brexit could have been a chance for a new beginning. But I don't think that they will ever let Britain go, because the center of worldwide Freemasonry is in London.
Yeah, but won't they gain more power? This is my point. Europe right now is in such massive debt that they have to actually increase the amount of indebtedness. If Brexit happens, they'll actually have to leave. Europe will have to even rely more on the banks than Britain. Even though Brexit's happened, I put out this contrarian theory because you never know exactly how they weighed things, and they'll even put it out in the media that there's so much against it, and they have the Joe Cox thing happen.
I tell you one thing, the Joe Cox thing is quite obvious, because, I'm half English. I know the sheep-minded mentality of the Brits. I'm sorry to say, but I know it because...
You mean they can make a good sound?
No, the problem is with Brits, and I come from the family of a Queen Mother. I come from a royal family, so I think I know a few things about how to manipulate Brits. Right. And if you do something like you did with Joe Cox, you get basically the whole of Great Britain on your side in a couple of days, because the same thing happened with Princess Diana when she died.
Oh, yes. The people were flocking. They're much more sheep-like than Americans or even Canadians or Aussies. That's true, isn't it?
It's incredible. They have this kind of worship. They go into this kind of, trance.
The worship of the royals.
And
even politicians that are, of people in the positions of power, they worship them in a sense.
They worship, and at the same time, they worship their actions, like going to the hometown of Joe Cox, the Prime Minister making his scene, and then Corbyn from the opposition, and the whole show. It's a good show. It's a good Shakespearean play, and I think that William Shakespeare taught us a few things on how the psychology of the Brits works out.
Oh my! But I still say. I like to do alternative theories to say, whatever that happens, the snake always moves forward toward a target. In other words,
absolutely.
I think they have a plan B that if Brexit does go through by a percentage or two, they have a plan to collapse forward to an eventuality where they gain more power, more financial control, and more loss of sovereignty of the nations.
Absolutely, I think that there is a plan, also Plan B.
Right.
But because Plan B will implement a much bigger investment than Plan A, it's much easier to just trick the elections now.
Oh yeah, of course it is. Yeah.
Like in Italy, you vote, you use this pencil kind of thing, when you go and vote. I wonder what they use there for the Brexit. But I think that the main thing is that we can never really trust 100% these votes to then be delivered in the right way. So it's very easy to trick an election. You had it even with Al Gore in Florida many years ago happening in the US. Everybody saw it. It was pretty obvious that Governor Bush tricked the elections and rigged them in Florida. But
they rigged them, and they actually had a greater vote for Igor, I call him, instead of Al Gore. I like his, yes, we're an environmentalist like Igor, the humpback from Notre Dame. What I'm concerned about now is there's a number of events happening. We talked about this with Tim Alexander. The next event is that they're into negative interest now in Germany and in other European countries. We're now seeing a collapse toward a debt structure that is a set of dominoes, and there's a whole series of, I call the devil's menu of things that can push the economy of the world over the edge. We're now deploying NATO troops, Canadian troops, British troops, whatever, on the Russian border, and deploying also first strike launch weapon systems against the Russians. Also defensive systems. There's now 2 defensive systems against nukes. They say are from rogue weapons from, quote, Islamic countries. But in fact, the Russians see it as a direct challenge. Instead of trying to collaborate with Russia and include them in part of NATO, which is what we should be doing to try to get rid of extreme terrorism, we're actually importing unvetted Muslims when $1 spent here in America could help 11 people back in their Middle Eastern country and build infrastructure and have them live in a stable environment in their own place, including the exploration and development of primary water, which Muammar Gaddafi was doing. They blew up his British drill rigs where 75% of the new water, and it was basically oasis water from deep in the earth. What I see happening is everything is manipulation. There's nothing, including even what it goes on one side or another of an election, that they are manipulating and controlling. It's like Don King, the guy that used to have both fighters in the ring. And one announcer said many years ago, Don, who do you think is going to win the fight? He says, me. Because he said, I have both fighters. So the New World Order has both fighters in the ring. One way or the other, they're going to win.
It's an old, since the establishment of the Rothschild economic faction, the finances of this New World Order we are taught even into school here in Italy, I don't know if in the US, how both factions of the Rothschilds finance Napoleon and the Brits against each other, England against Napoleon. So, I mean, this is a very old technique to actually be able to be above every part, But the problem here is that the New World Order concept is moving towards the establishment of continent states, not anymore of single sovereign
Exactly,
states.
continent states, yeah. Complement trade zones, I would call it, continental trade zones. For example, Zone 3 is Canada, the United States, and Mexico as a continental trade zone. They don't consider it a country anymore, it's a continental trade zone, which is why they're continuing to build the North American trade corridor right through the center of the United States, all the way from Villa Cardenas in Mexico to Winnipeg, Manitoba, the most Masonic city in Canada. And they're building high-speed rail, underground tunnels, all kinds of stuff. And they're putting pieces of it together for an eventuality, probably in 5 or 10 years when it's all completed, that all of the coastal traffic will move to the center of the continent.
I think that what the late, now he's actually still alive, but he's more dead than alive, but the guy is still a very powerful individual. I'm talking about Giorgio Napolitano, used to be the president of Italy until a couple of years ago. He said in a speech he gave at the university, he really went into detail of how these continent states will be divided and will be operational within this new world order. So, this is not a secret. They actually openly talk about it in the academic world. So it's for the normal folks that are blinded and that are taking their sovereignty from them. Because ultimately, as you know, we are going into the hands of the banks, into the hands of the big conglomerates, and we are basically giving up completely any idea of democracy.
Right.
Now, this morning, another Italian politician called Bersani, who used to be the head of the Democrat Party here in Italy, he said, we have to give, like I said before, we have to give up our sovereignty as soon as possible. There is going to be, now all the states here in Europe will have to give up their sovereignty. So this Brexit is really their last attempt, because they will not be able to call another Brexit in the future, because at this point, I'm sorry to say, if you are in England, in Northern Ireland, or in Scotland, or in Wales, wherever you have voted for this Brexit, and you have not made this decision now, you will be prisoner of the system forever. No, that's it. It's the last chance.
Now, what I understand is they keep the British pound sterling, but because of Brexit, because of the recurring arrangement with Europe, they're flooded with this Haraj, this Muslim immigration. And Hillary wants to, if she gets in power, increase it by 535%. There really is no need for the immigration for the three reasons they could reverse it. Number one, we could stabilize the war zone by getting rid of extreme Islam by collaborating with Russia and China and the local countries. We can also resettle them in some of these other countries where they have places like Saudi Arabia has already tent cities for 1 million people or more.
But the thing is this, Bill, I don't know if you've ever been in London, but London...
Oh yeah, I've been there, yeah.
Yeah, there is areas of London that are completely owned by the Saudis, and they financed a bunch of mosques. Whole areas of London are in the hands of Muslims.
That's why I
myself used to live near Edgware Road, which is one of the main streets where the Muslims started there.
That's why I call it Londonistan now. It's do you like that?
It is. Well, now you have even the mayor who is a Pakistani. But apart from that, London is really a city which is not anymore in the hands of the British people. Right. So, and neither politically or economically. So, what are you going to do? A civil war to regain the city? It's very difficult that they will ever.
No, it's already over. It's like we have 9.7 million Muslims in America. Even if we stopped immigration, 72% of the mosques in America are already radicalizing, and the FBI watch it and actually want terrorism because they want to take domestic security bills to take away and disarm the American public and take away more rights. And of course, this Tuesday, Janet Yellen was meeting, they've been talking about for the last year and a half, about a Fed coin, getting rid of money altogether to make it biometric. So that's the Fed. We're not just talking about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. We're talking about 90% of the world money going totally digital, believe it or not. Welcome back. So, Leo, whatever happens here, the latest they get, of course, the Drudge seems to be kind of the head of the thing, it says, World Watchers, as Britain votes on EU membership, stocks jump, apparently, so they're expecting, I think, Britain to stay inside the European sphere of power. Britain decides...
the great pressure that was put in the last week or so by Obama, by the NSA. Apparently in this extreme right situation, which then pushed this lonely wolf, which used a pistol, which, strangely enough, his pistol had the number plate is being put off. It's been, is scrubbed off. You don't scrub off a number plate if you don't have anything to hide. So
in other words, there's fingerprints that it may be a lone wolf steered by CIA or some other agency.
Absolutely.
So this has all the markings of a.
But we have a very long story of the British right-wing extremism being connected to the CIA or to Mossad. So, this is not like something, from yesterday. We know about Gladio, we know about operations, anti-communist operations in the past that were established in Europe originally to fight what was known as communism and the Soviet Union in the Cold War. But then these networks stayed behind, networks, that's how they're called. They actually stayed operational. I talk about them in volume 1 of my Confessions and also in volume 2. So I think that it's very important that people also read my book, Confessions of an Illuminati, so they can understand a little bit more.
They need to get this full set. The 1 from last fall, the 2, and of course the number 3 is coming out next year, right?
Yes, and I tell you that this murder really fits perfectly into what I explained at the end of Volume 1 in regards to far-right extremism in Europe and how it was easily manipulated for this kind of operations. So, it's not the first time they actually do this kind of thing, but still, the Brits fall for it, and of course, this makes them stay in Europe. So they stay into this trap. Everybody's happy. Tomorrow the big titles will be Cameron is happy, the Labours they are happy. Everybody's happy, and that's it.
Let me read the latest points that I'm getting here right from to the moment. It's saying the Stay camp is ahead by 6 points on the referendum polls, but 11% were undecided. And of course, they have massive torrential rains, and they closed 2 of the polling stations in London because the rains are so heavy.
That's another strange thing. I'm starting to really think that it was artificially created, this situation, unprecedented around London. People started seeing this really strange thunderstorm, lightning, like it seemed like hell on earth. Why is this happening now? Of course, it pushes a lot of people to not go and vote.
Well, I think there's levels of possibilities. The first level is 5 nations have weather modification technology, including Britain.
But this we know. They have.
Yeah. The second level is there's a spiritual level to this. Because what's going on with Brexit is so evil that it could bring about the demise of human civilization on the planet Earth. Because all these things that they're converging to are to massively reduce world population once they get total control of the population. You remove their guns, control their cash, and make it all biometric. That's where we're all going with all of this. And not just in Britain. As you mentioned earlier, Leo, they want to get rid of national sovereignty completely in every country on Earth. And the remaining few countries that are left to still have some system of banking that's outside of it, such as Syria, Iran, North Korea, and Cuba. These are the only nations that don't have an integrated banking system that's tied to the World Bank construction system, including, by the way, China and Russia do have banks that are integrated with the world system, although now Russia is using the SWIFT-like system for transfer of funds overnight that was developed in China. And China, of course, now has a new reserve currency. They're saying they're not going to exchange their gold-backed currency with other currencies, but all the other currencies on the planet are not backed by gold. They're printed on a printing press, or they're just created electronically in air.
Well, this is what's happening in Europe, because the euro is really created out of thin air. In America, you have the Federal Reserve, but of course, where did the gold originally come from to create the Federal Reserve? Now, not many people know, but some of this gold was actually stolen, or actually was deposited and never given back to the Tsar of all Russia. So this
from old Russia, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's where the money came from.
How much gold do you think?
that was nearly all of the original gold that was positioned there as an asset to form the Federal Reserve. So theoretically,
the Russian Orthodox Church knows about this gold, that the politicians like Putin are aware of it, and that if there's any kind of level of peace, including collaboration to deal with Islam, extreme Islam in the Middle East, then probably a transfer of this gold, which is held since the fall of the Tsars 100 years ago, the 75,000 tons of gold, which I know from my contacts in New York that 45% of the world's entire reserve of gold is held at that one bank in giant vaults in an underground city with its own private army and security force. 45% of the entire world's gold is in one bank in New York City, the Federal Reserve Bank in New York. Most of the probably that 75,000 tons is actually sitting in those vaults in New York City, which is, again, I call it the capital of the world, is New York.
Then you have also the gold from the Nazis, so that's another part of the gold that then also went through the Vatican and back into. I mean, there is with this gold, definitely there is a lot of interests that are not apparent to the people. This is part of the work of the intelligence services that at more high level deals with the financial establishment. So when you're talking about this kind of quantities of gold, you're talking about incredible interest that can trigger wars, that can sponsor wars, and of course, when it comes down to the latest Pan-Orthodox event, which was the biggest event ever held in the Orthodox Church, it took place between the 19th of June and it lasted a few days. I think it stopped, finished yesterday. Right. But in any case, it was unsuccessful for the main reason being that Kirill in Moscow didn't send and didn't come himself to the meeting because he doesn't care to establish a link with Bartolomeo first, who is closer to the Americans.
Right, so Bartolomeo is the cardinal that's connected with the Vatican, so you're saying that the Vatican
No. Bartolomeo I is the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church of Constantinople.
Right.
Then there is
That's what I mean. In other words, he didn't want to make an alliance with the Orthodox Church in Constantinople with the Russian Orthodox, is what you're saying.
Well, they didn't participate, and they kind of this meeting in the end didn't really turn out to be what has been. Remember that this meeting was in the process of being organized for many decades. So it is an incredible failure now to have this result. Really? We hope that, because it took decades to put together all these Orthodox factions. The main factions are the Romanian Orthodox faction, and there is the Russian, and there is the Constantinople faction, which of course operates also in Greece and other countries. So the thing is that these patriarchats, as we know, are independent because the nature of Orthodox is independent, on the contrary of the Vatican that controls everything Catholic. So it seems like there is a big clash of geopolitical interests that got in the way of the religious interest. And this is very sad, really, if you think about it.
Yeah, because if there had been collaboration with the Constantinople division of the Orthodox Church and the Russian, it would be a stronger bulwark against the power that's expanding with the World Council of Churches and the connection between the globalists and the Vatican, because the Vatican is making a much deeper pact with globalism and Agenda 2030 and the global banks. The connection between the Vatican, for example, and Operation Paperclip is clear that it was a complete transplant of the specific agencies that were inside Germany that later founded the OAS and became the CIA and the NSA, are basically have their genesis from the Vatican and the Jesuits, and the transplantation of the system to the United States.
Of course, orthodoxy is in the way of all this. I explained it in the last chapter of my book, Pope Francis, the Last Pope, where I really position Kirill as being somebody that could change things around if he didn't accept how things were actually going into that direction. The direction is to unify everything under a one-world religion that is very biased also towards Islam, actually includes Islam. It's in the hands of the Jesuits, everything became Chrislam, this mix.
Right, in fact, you mentioned one of the things in your book was the Pentalpha division of cardinals in Rome and Vatican are actually have converted in a sense to Islam. In other words, they've brought Islam as being a co-equivalent to current Judeo-Christian faith in the Catholic Church.
Well, they regard it as strictly as a geopolitical tool to manipulate people, as a much more powerful tool than the Bible, because people nowadays, nobody in the world, nearly nobody, probably only a few fundamentalists, but not even those anymore, kill in the name of the Bible. There is nobody that kills in the name of Jesus Christ.
Right.
And so they couldn't really use the Bible to trigger instead what they're doing with the Quran. The Quran is a tool in their hands that can trigger the worst nightmares. We saw it recently in America with what happened in Orlando. So this is what we have to fight against, and especially now this moment is very dangerous for Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is the only one who could make peace with Russia and really send things to a completely different direction.
What I heard is that Donald Trump's been doing business for 20, 25 years with the Russians, not only the Russian oligarchs, but has very good relationships with them. One of the statements he uses, I have very good relationships. And he knows that if Russia and America collaborate, we can clean up the extreme Islam. There's three things that need to be done. He knows we have to revise NATO, so it should include some role for Russia. And we have to start changing it so that the other nations pay their fair share, but also refocus against terrorism. And then the final step we need to do. The final step we need to do is we need to stop buying the oil from ISIS and supporting them financially. And these Islamic states like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the Arab Emirates, we literally use them as a proxy for our foreign policy.
But it's not possible without Britain staying in the European Union, because Brexit would be a catastrophe for this.
I think you're right that looking at the Drudge reports, it's almost certain that Brexit is going to be defeated. It's very, very probable that's going to be defeated. It says indefinite leave to remain.
This is what I said in my article that I published in Italian yesterday on my website, that got many hundreds of views and actually thousands of condivisions, and hundreds more, because it's an article which it's unfortunately only in the Italian language, but I describe in this article how it's been all decided. So the Brexit is just a charade now in the hands of these people after the manipulation that they have done with the murder of Joe Cox. So I think that if people really have to investigate this New World Order affair, they should go really deeper into the murder of Joe Cox and understand the level of manipulations that these people are capable of when they are really on the edge of losing. Because they were on the edge of losing, but by killing Joe Cox, they saved the whole thing. I mean, this is how bad it is. It's quite incredible.
Yeah, basically, they'll do anything. Now, one of the things that happened on Tuesday, and this is Yellen, actually, Yellen from the Federal Reserve, has met with Congress, and in the last year and a half, she's actually mentioned that they can't afford the cost of printing money, and there have been repeated reports coming out that they want to talk about a Fed coin or a cryptocurrency. This is a very dangerous thing. We're not just talking about 100 cryptocurrencies or little, $5, $10, $20 million worth of value. We're talking about 90% of the world currency literally going completely biometric now. Of the Fed Reserve notes that are circulating around the world, 2/3 of them are actually in virtual space. They've never been printed. But if they go completely to a cryptocurrency, it means they'll only be able to validate currency transactions using biometrics of the individual. So they either have to have a tattoo or a chip on you or do DNA validation. And I visited in Chicago and in Oak Ridge National Labs Building 10, where they had the biochip in 1999. In 5 minutes with endonuclease technology and a laptop, they can take a microdrop or hundredths of a drop of blood and determine who you are from any other individual on Earth, including your blood type, your HLA types, and other tissue enzyme pathways to make sure they know you from any other individual. We're moving toward a biometric cyberspace world. In fact, Zuckerberg has invested $2 billion to, quote, supersede the cell phone. And the cell phone is a modern mark of the beast. I mean, as I say, all we'd have to do is make mandatory Velcro, and the mark would be complete, because it tracks you, it handles all your transactions, and now we have Samsung Pay and other technologies. So people need to realize we're only a couple baby steps away from a system where they have total control. And if they press Alt-Delete, your money disappears and you no longer can buy or sell because you're no longer in cyberspace. That's where we're going. It's pretty nasty. And of course, the loss of national sovereignty, which has been happening for decades now in Europe, is now going to be complete, because Brexit will probably take even more rights away from the people there that have only 15% of their legislation is controlled by their local people. It's all bureaucrats in Brussels.
Well, the non-Brexit, because Brexit means Britain exit. This exit has not been happening.
I don't think Britain. I'm pretty sure Britain's not going to leave. And
no. So the defeat of the Brexit, it's very important, I think, for people to understand how NATO, alongside with President Obama, worked out a strategy for the regional interest in a very short time to shift this whole vote in the direction that they wanted, which is basically to get the anti-Brussels movement to fail. And I think that by attacking the anti-Brussels movement in Great Britain, they are basically also attacking those movements very strong now. Like in France, you have Marine Le Pen, that is growing very strong nationalist front with their Front National. And then you have also in Italy other factions. This is a bit of a blow for Donald Trump in a way, unfortunately. And I hope that he can turn this thing around in the US, because of course the fact that Great Britain stays in Europe is also very good for Hillary Clinton.
It's very good. And the fact is, they want to homogenize the cultures. There's divisions within the Vatican and the European unelected bureaucrats that want to homogenize and get rid of culture. They want to get rid of national borders, and they want to get rid of national identity. The whole idea is to homogenize the culture so it's more controllable.
I think that unfortunately we are suffering from ignorance on the real story on how the American Committee created the United Europe, the ACUE, which was chaired by Donovan, because that is really the OSS. It's before even the CIA took place. You had this board that included also Walter Bedell-Smith and Alan Dulles, and these were the CIA directors after in the 50s, but they are all ex-OSS officials. So I think that from this moment in which, the Nazis were absorbed for the war against communism, and at the same time you created this new faction within the NATO, certain alliances became untouchable. And so you can't really expect Britain to go out of a plan which has been crafted by these people many years ago. I mean, it's impossible. Here we're talking about people who have the legendary head of the wartime OSS, like Bill Donovan. I mean, this is like legends of the CIA,
Right, and the OSS, and of course the OSS is he was the American face of a system which is totally Nazi and German. People don't realize that the genesis of the Nazi secret orders reproduced itself in America. So in fact, the rise of the American Empire is the rise of a basically under the control of secret Nazi agencies in the guise of America.
Yes, and they brought with them their secret societies, their secret rituals, even certain practices of human sacrifice, of infants, with secret Jewish cults also. That
this is tied with what we're going to talk about in the second hour with Tex Myers talking about the Kabbalah and the Sefer Yetzirah and the Talmud of Babylon. And what people need to understand is the current Talmudic Judaism is not Jewish, it's not Hebrew, it's pure Satanism. And and these higher secret agencies in America are completely satanic. So the CIA and NSA, at their core, are satanic agencies transplanted from Nazi Germany that go back to the Gelle and Zulinschaft societies that are ancient pagan societies in the modern guise.
I would say that before even being satanic, they were pagan. They are pagan.
That's what I mean by pagan is satanic. I mean, paganism is, in a sense, another face of Satanism.
It's basically very easy after to go into the dark side, because paganism doesn't have the same kind of barriers of monotheism, and so it's very easy to then go on the dark side. You see, there is there is no barriers there, so everything is permitted in a way. But we see, and I explained this in volume 2 of my Confessions, how the Jewish religion, which is the most ancient form of religious Freemasonry, is basically coming from ancient Egypt, and so in ancient Egypt this tradition was crafted in a way. And of course, Moses, being a high priest of Osiris, he understood certain concepts. He brought them to his people that became the people of this new covenant with God. And of course, all this is debatable for some people, but there is more and more evidence that the Jewish people have this big heritage coming in from Egypt. And you know, in Egypt, black magic was the norm for the high priest of a certain level who dealt with the gods of the underworld. I mean, we're talking here about death cults. We're talking about cults also from ancient Babylonian times, for example, that saw also the Jews being there for a period of time, where we have then cults that were even accepted at the time of Solomon, because the cult of Moloch was legitimate at the time of King Solomon, and this is not discussed really.
If you actually read the Kabbalah and the Talmud of Babylon, they refer to Solomon as a grand wizard, that he and Solomon actually summoned demons to build the temple, the first temple.
Absolutely. This is one of the subjects of one of my next books. It's basically, in Italy came out as volume 4, in America will be called The Invisible Master, and I go deeply into this subject, so it will be interesting.
In fact, there were two main wizards. One was Solomon, and apparently was the head of the tribe of Dan. They were called the Grand Wizards that actually summoned these demonic entities in order to build the temple. And it's recorded right in their Talmud of Babylon, so it's not surprising that a lot of Jewish people have rejected the craziness of the Kabbalah and the Talmud of Babylon and either become secular agnostics, social communists, or whatever, because they know that this is it's insane thought. Just like a lot of Muslims don't accept the scriptures.
Well, the Muslims, you see, have in the Quran a lot about King Solomon and the genies and these entities. So this is something that maybe people don't know about.
They're fully aware of it, even in Islam, aren't they?
They are very, there is a very detailed description of how Solomon used these genes.
Right. The jinn, right?
The jinn,
yeah. Excellent. Back in a moment with Leo Zagami. Get his books at Barnes & Noble and Amazon. Confessions of the Illuminati, Part 2, available Part 1 last year. It's cancellation day for your levels of ignorance of what's going on in the world. And, it's interesting. Last week I had a gentleman that called in, and he thought there was a lot of, foolishness, that the idea that there was some hybridization of beings from other worlds to create the Nephilim, which are the renowned men of the ancient Bible, but it's also present in every book on the planet. What people need to realize is you can't throw out a scripture in the Bible and say, well, I believe this in the New Testament, and throw something in the Old. You also have to understand, if you don't understand the nature of the universe, you will be a victim of it. And what we're trying to teach here, and with your books, is you're trying to say basically most of the battles on Earth are battles between good and evil orders. They're secret orders fighting for either the will of the Most High God on the planet, or evil, which is satanic, which is do what thou wilt is the whole of the law, if you want to call it. That's the principle behind what we're talking about. And what's going on right now, for example, with Donald Trump, because he belongs to a Scottish Rite Order that's trying to do good to bring America back and to bring Christian principles back, he's fighting against a Mormon and a Rothschild secret, basically a Jewish, or we'll call it Jewish, but it's not really. It's basically ancient Babylonian, Egyptian, satanic rites of the high priest order that's now in our modern times. And people don't realize the world is ruled by wizards. It's not ruled by politicians. It's not even ruled by bankers. They're functionaries. The real issue is our world is ruled by wizards, by those that bring up the powers of good and evil, and the battle is in the heavenlies, and then it translates to the physical world, which is literally a hologram of the projections of the higher spiritual reality. It says right all through the Bible. People don't understand that. They think it's kind of like ethereal and it's kind of just like a philosophical principle. No, it's a real principle of the nature, just like gravity is a principle of why things stick to the planet Earth. And what you're showing in your books is really important for people to understand that these battles between these secret orders And for example, why don't we collaborate with the Russians? Why was there a break between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Orthodox Church in Constantinople? Obviously, there's powers that don't want these collaborations to occur. It's important for us to understand what's going on with Brexit and why Brexit failed and how they killed Joe Cox. And the fact that with the scrubbing of the numbers indicates that powers that be, just like when they switched, as my friend up in a Kurdish friend from Iran told me on the weekend, how in fact they put in the Ayatollah and they want to Islamify Iran and remove the current culture, which has strip bars and movie theaters and everything Western, and then all of a sudden it was being Islamified under the aegis of the CIA. So people don't understand the operations of the unification of Europe under Bill Donovan and the ACEU. And I'm posting up the article you sent me, Leo. You need to get Leo Zagami's books. This is required reading. If you think you know it all, which you don't, you'll know more if you ask the right questions after you read Leo Zagami's books. The Confessions of the Illuminati Part 2 and Part 1, Part 3 is coming. And listen to these shows. Leo's back every Thursday, first hour, to discuss these issues, because if you don't understand it, you will be a victim and you will suffer. So don't suffer, become informed. Thank you, Leo.
Thank you for having me on the show, and God bless America, and let's hope Britain will save itself outside of these strategies in some way or another.
Absolutely. We'll talk next Thursday. Take care. God bless. Back in a moment. Tex Mars coming on.